Today I'm going to make another NEIPA. It's the same recipe basically that I used last time, and it was really successful. I thought it was a delicious one, so having another go. So we're going to use some Centennial, some Sabro, some Citra, some Mosaic, and the Lollemon Verdant IPA yeast, which personally I think is the key to the success. We're going to do first wort hops, Centennial, a hop stand of Sabros, Citra and Mosaic, and then we'll finish off with some dry hops, and it'll be, I'll talk about that later because I might vary a little bit from what's here. So we're filling up our water, 23 litres, and I'll get the grains going. Now the recipe's got 4 kilos of pale malt. This is Weighman Premium Pills I'm using. Last time it was Voyager Atlas, but I couldn't get that during lockdown, so I've opted for the Weighman. We've got now to add some Munich. I'm using Joe White, 0.9. And we've got some wheat malt. We want 0.45 of a kilo. Now last time I put in, let's just check, 0.3 of a kilo of flaked oats. Only I haven't got flaked oats this time, but I do have some malted oats from Voyager. So I'm going to have a go at that. Now they're quite small as compared to the other grains, so I'm going to mill them separately just to be sure that they do get a crush. I'm going to have to adjust the mill down a bit, make it a bit tighter for these guys. But if I put a few of these grains, you can see they're quite small when you compare them to the wheat and pale malt. Maybe they mightn't be as small as I think, but I'm going to just try a few in here and see whether they'll mill all right. Better get a tool onto it. Now this crush isn't quite as good as I'd like. I mean, some of the kernels here are not crushed at all. So I think what I'll do is just run it all through and then tip it back through and run it again with the rest of the grist. And that way I think I'll end up crushing the ones that escaped last time. So we'll see how it goes. So I'll mix in a bit of this grist and a few flaked oats, or rather malted oats. A bit more of this, a bit more of that. In fact, I might even just dip it in there. Now, as you can probably see from that, there's a lot of dust on the top, and that's just wiped off the bottom of the mill. Excuse me. Now normally when you condition the grain, you don't get any of that stuck on the bottom, and it's quite finely milled too, you can see. Probably more finely than I like, but that's because the grain wasn't conditioned and the husks didn't absorb any moisture, and therefore are more brittle than they would otherwise be. So I'm hoping that I don't end up with a wart fountain, which can sometimes happen with the Braumeister. I'm going to weigh out my salt additions, which for any IPA I think is I mean, they've got here 2:1 sulphate to chloride is good for bitter beer, 1:2 is good for mild ale. So I'm going to call it a mild ale for the sake of this calculation. So it'll be 1 measure of calcium sulphate to 2 of calcium chloride, and I'm going to use 5 grams to start as 1 measure. In fact, I'm going to use 2.5 grams, not 5. So we'll put that in. That's 3.3, 2.7, 2.7's near enough, and 5 of calcium chloride. I'm putting in the salts now. They don't dissolve totally readily, so give it a bit of a stir while the water's heating up. And the mash profile we're using today is 52 degrees Celsius mash in for 10 minutes, ramping up to 67 for an hour, and then ramping up to 78 for mash out for 10 minutes. And we'll only have 2 additions of hops during the brew, which will be a first wort addition at 88 degrees, which is when the pump on the Braumeister stops, and I don't want hops being drawn down inside through the pump system, so I'll put them in at 88, and the next lot goes in at flame out for a hop stand. So now I've just got to wait for this to come up to temperature. Okay, now I've just about finished measuring out the hops. I've got a container here with hop stand written on it so far that has the Mosaic and the Sabro in it. I'm going to do the Citra yet, and I've measured out a 0-minute addition, which I neglected to tell you about before, but that's 43 grams of Centennial. So we've got first wort hops of 12 grams of Centennial, 43 grams of Centennial Zero, 43 Sabro, 28 Citra and 28 Mosaic for a hop stand at 80 degrees or thereabouts for 20 minutes, and then 10 grams of Citra, 51 grams of Mosaic and 43 grams of Sabro, which will all be mixed together and then put in as 3 separate dry hops. So I'm down to my last tin. I just thought I'd show you that. This is from Yakima Valley in the United States, and I ordered one of their can packs, so I ended up with 8 of these cans, 2 of each type. So we had Sabro, Citra, Centennial and Mosaic. So this is the last can that I've opened. Now, it's packed with nitrogen, so they say, which should keep it as fresh. It says this can is double dosed with nitrogen for the lowest oxygen environment possible, the freshest hops straight out of hop country. So it doesn't or anything when you open it, but there you go. There's the hops in there, and they do smell very fresh. And oh, Citra, so good. Well, that beep signals that we've reached our mash in temperature. So I'll pop in the malt pot, taking care to remember to put the rubber seal on the bottom. Very important step. And our filter, bottom filter, is perforated steel and a fine mesh filter on top. So that goes to the bottom. I'll just make sure I poke the filter down. It comes with stainless steel, this Braumeister, but the problem with stainless steel is they tend to fray a bit, and you end up with stabbing your hand, but also bits taking off the edges, and it's not as efficient. So I'm using pet mesh, which I've been using for a few years now, and it hasn't been a problem. So in it goes. There's a few husks from the malted oats intact, which hopefully will act a bit like rice hulls and filter for me. I'll put that much in to start with. What I'm trying to avoid is dough balls, of course. There's the makings of one right there. Don't need that blowfly in here either. I brew in my garage and I had the door open early because it's a lovely day. However, the flies will come in if I do that. And once I get the mash going, I think I'll open the door again because it is a nice day and it gets a bit warm in here otherwise. Yeah, this is very, very fine crush. Now it's reversed this time. We put the fine mesh filter on top, then the mesh filter, and then our bar to lock it down. Now, somewhere here, and now we get to watch the pump reacting. It's sucking from outside and blowing up through the middle. And it'll go around, it's at 52 degrees now, and it's going to be 52 for 5 minutes. Then it'll ramp up to 67 for an hour, and then it ramps up to 78 for a mash out for 10 minutes. And we'll sparge it at that point. I'll now put the lid on and connect our vent to outside, so that keeps the brewery reasonably smell free, as the vapours will disappear out through the window. More important when I'm boiling, less important for mashing. So we'll just let that mash for the time, and I'll come back and show you a bit more when we're finished. We've reached the end of the mash, so I'll quit, and our sparge water's up to 70 degrees, not quite to 78, however it's probably close enough. So I need to take this lid off. It's a bit hot for fingers. Where's my other glove? I haven't got one. And as you can see, the water is now nice and clear. And not a bad colour. When that's creamy, it'll be a good, nice orangey, creamy colour, or hazy. Take that off, this is a bit hot too. Now we'll lift the basket up and hoist that up. So I'm going to sparge with 8 litres of water, which will be enough, I think. Now we'll sparge just over the top screen, for the first one anyway. That's draining fairly freely. I don't want to overflow the top of that little bit in the middle, because it'll go down the hole which has been pierced through the mash by the hold down bar. So we'll just let that drain. Now at this point you could add first wort hops, but as I said earlier, because we're not at or above 88 degrees, we're actually at 78 now, so it's going to heat up. Now the pump's running while it heats the wort, but I don't want to add the hops in and have it get all sucked through the pump. So I'm just going to leave that until we hit at 88 degrees. I've got the malt pipe now resting on this baking tray, the baking rack. So it's well above the level of the wort, and I'm just going to let that drip down until it's really stopped dripping effectively. We're at 86 degrees, got to get up to 88, and then I'll stick the first wort hops in, which is 12 grams of Centennial. Oh, that smells good. And we'll be boiling for an hour. At the end of the hour, we'll put in our 43 grams of Centennial, and then I'll let that sit for a few minutes, and I'll cool it down. I'll stick the cooler in. Now, there's my cooling coil. It's connected to an inflow and an outflow tap from my water tank. So I've got 5,000 litres of rainwater, and there's a pump on that connected to other taps, but also to these. So I can flow the rainwater through here to cool the wort, and then back out and into the downpipe, back into the tank, so I don't waste any water. We can now drive more than 25 kilometres from our homes, which is great. It means I can go to Melbourne and get some more brewing supplies, but at the moment, and maybe I can go and get a haircut too, which clearly I need. But all the barbers are busy at the moment because they've been shut up for 3 months. However, I'm sure there are more important things to worry about than that. One of the most important things you can do if you're going to boil with a lid on, or even if you're not, if you're concerned about a boil over, is put in 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of foam control, firm cap, and it won't boil over. So that's brilliant. Well, that beep signifies the end of the boil phase. I'll turn that off. We'll take this off, take the hood off, and we'll see what we've got. This is nice and hot. I've got to watch I don't burn myself with steam and hot water. Make some room. Right, take the top off. It is very hot, of course, being boiling for an hour. And that's looking pretty bloody good. So 0 minutes, hops go in. Sanitised stirrer. I'll just give that a bit of a light stir, make sure it's all incorporated. You can see that the first batch of hops is all stuck around the side here, so they're pretty much spent. So boiling with the lid on creates this stuff around the top, which I think is not a bad thing really, because once the hops have given up their oils, having the additional hop material in the water is of no particular advantage. I'm not really sure what the difference is when you put the last lot of hops in at 0. Well, I suppose it's just the temperature. I mean, we're now at 98. This goes back into the sanitised bucket. And I've got over here my cooler, which has been sitting in some sanitizer. Because I don't sanitise it during the boil, I always sanitise it in a bucket first, which gives me a little bit of relatively clean, unused sanitizer later that I can pop in to a keg or whatever else I need to clean. 93, so it goes fairly quickly for the first 10 or 15 degrees, and of course, as you probably know, it slows right down after that. 84, I think I'll pull it out. 84, there we go. I'll turn that water off. Actually, back into the sanitizer. Can't hurt. And our hop stand hops. 100 grams. In they go. We'll give them a good stir. So what is it, 3:05. I really want to whirlpool this for about 20 minutes. But I don't think I can stand here and do this for 20 minutes. So I'll do it for 2 or 3 and then let it settle. So 79 degrees, it's 2 minutes to go before we cool. The fermenter's been cleaned from the last use, however, and sanitised. But since I have a bucket of sanitizer here, I think I'll just put that in and give it a swish round with my sanitizer sponge. I'm reasonably pedantic about the sanitising. I've only had, in 5 years, 2 beers that had to be tipped out because they'd had some infection or other. And with the amount of money that you have to spend on the ingredients, it's not something I ever want to have to do again. So I am a bit careful about it. I'm going to have to tip this back into the bucket. Alright, they can go under the spigot, and I'll just get a little bowl, open the bottom valve to catch all the foam that I don't really want in the fermenter. Not that it'll do any harm, but I don't think it's necessary to have it either. So that can come off. Yeah, that's hot again. Take the top off. That's not a bad colour. Most of the particulates fall into the bottom. Check that the valve's shut at the bottom, it is. And away we go. I took a gravity sample earlier and I was at 1049, which is about where I want to be really. The last batch was 1055, but there's 100 grams of base malt missing from this, which would probably contribute to that change. However, it'll probably end up around 5%, slightly more, and that's good. It's a nice colour. But you can see that coming up to the top, it looks nice and fluffy. Just give it a bit of a lean. I don't really want the wort to make contact with the lid, so I'll back it off as it approaches that. And I know I'll have more than enough. So that'll about do me, I think. Here it goes. Excuse me. Lid on. Job done. Now I'm going to carry this beast over to the fermenting fridge and attach the sight glass. In it goes. Right, so we'll put our sight glass on. I know the bottom of this is sanitised, but you know, just to be sure. So I've got sanitised grommet, O-ring, seal, whatever you want to call it. And we have our sanitised blow off. I'll open that. And in it goes. Oh, I need my temperature probe. It's set at 20 here. It's reading 25.5 and coming down a bit. So that's good. That's a nice pitching temperature that it's ended up at, because it always cools a bit as it falls out of the boil pot. So I'm happy with that.